Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far in, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to promote my channel. I also love it if you leave a comment. I think today I'm going to do something sparkly, a pendant that has 3 different faceted stones, and they start with a small one at the top and get a little bit bigger, and then the biggest one's at the bottom. I think I'm going to use blue topaz, amethyst, and some prasiolite for the biggest one. It's going to have kind of a little swirl pattern holding it all together. I'm going to make 3 prong settings, and then we'll add a bail to it after it's all connected. Before we get started on that, though, I wanted to thank some of my followers, in particular my Patreon group. What a wonderful group you guys have turned out to be. I learned so much from you, and I really appreciate all of the support. It's been a great experience getting to know you over there, so thank you so much for that. My YouTube subscribers, we're about to pass, we're getting pretty close to 9,000. I think we're at 88 something, and that's awesome. I really appreciate that. You know, feel free to tell your friends to subscribe too. I'd love to hit 10,000. But I do appreciate all of the nice things that you say in the comment section and the good suggestions, and I really appreciate the financial support as well. Like when you buy me a coffee, that helps out a lot with buying supplies, which I go through pretty quickly. So thanks for that, and I think it's time to get started on this project. Of late, I have been drawing up my designs before I start making them, which I did not used to do when I did this in years past. I have found, however, that sketching stuff out really helps me to come up with a better outcome, and it helps me to get proportions right and things like that. I like these books, which you can get in my merch store, in 3 different cover designs, because they have a little dot matrix in the background, and it helps me to keep things sort of lined up and proportional. So not my strongest suit, just by freehanding things. Okay, so I'll show you the stones. A little blue topaz, got a little kind of lavendery amethyst, and then prasiolite, which if you've never seen prasiolite, it's heat-treated amethyst, and it turns a kind of a light green color. This one's a very pale one, but I think that'll be pretty. We're going to make a little prong setting for each of those, and then I'm going to take some square wire and taper it. I think I'll probably use 12 gauge for this stuff and 14 gauge for this. For the base of the little faceted stones, I think I'm going to use some 16 gauge square, which I made a little piece of it out of some 14 because I didn't have any. And then we'll probably use 16 gauge round for the prongs on the big one and 18 gauge round for the prongs on these little ones. Not sure about this loop. I'll decide later on when I get to that, and then we'll put some kind of bail on the top to give it something to hang from the chain. So I think let's first, all 3 of these are going to be pretty much the same except different sizes. So I'll probably just do 1 on camera, and then I'll do the other 2 off camera, so you don't have to watch me do the same thing 3 times. So we'll start with the prasiolite one, I think, so you can see best. With this, I'm going to use, like I said, I'm going to use this 16 gauge square wire, and I just pulled it through the draw plate, so it's a little bit stiff right now from work hardening. So I'm going to go ahead and anneal that to soften it up. If you've never done annealing before, it's just heating it up to the point where it's kind of a light red color and then letting it cool off. Anytime you pound or twist or squish, bend back and forth, and you silver it, it work hardens it pretty seriously, making it more and more stiff and springy. And so if you want to be able to bend it easily and for it to keep its shape when you do, you want it to be softened up, and that's what annealing does. Do you move this? Get that kind of warm, and then we'll let it cool off for a minute. The sizes on these stones, the prasiolite's a 9mm, the amethyst is about a 6, and the blue topaz is a 5. So I think they make a pretty good taper that way. There's a number of different ways you could do the basket for this, for each of these stones. I'm just, like I said, I'm going to do a straight circle made out of this 16 gauge. And we're going to have 4 prongs sticking up off the top of that. Clean up the end here. I think to round this out, this is going to be pretty close to that piece. So I'm going to use my bail making pliers here. This will also help keep the square wire from twisting too much if I change it back and forth like this a little bit when I'm bending it around this. Also don't want to squeeze too hard so I dimple the sides too much. I do that periodically when I'm not thinking about it. So that's just a little bit big, but that gives me a good starting point. So I'm going to cut that off right about there. And then I'm going to cut it off a little bit shorter than where they meet. And I'll file those 2 ends and we'll see where we're at. So I want this to be a little bit smaller than that because I want just a tiny bit sticking out from the stone so I can put prongs on there. I may use 18 gauge on this one too instead of 16 so that it's a little bit tighter, because I don't want a lot of space extra around here. Another option would be to run prongs to the outside of the circle and make the circle just the same size. That would make that a little less visible. But that would also complicate the edge of this where I'm soldering that, where I'd have to file a notch there for that to fit in. Same way up here, and over here and here, and here and here. So I think I'm going to mount them on the top. But I still want it to be slightly smaller than that, I think. I think that's about right. Let me get that lined up and we'll solder him closed. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder. And I use a liquid flux called My-T-Flux that I spray on with a spray bottle. Very rarely use anything but hard silver solder. It just doesn't seem necessary most of the time. Alright, so we're just going to use a little piece of solder here. These ones are a little bit big that I have left over, so I'm going to cut a few small ones. It's been a busy week this week. This is a 4-video week since I do one for Patreon periodically. This was a Patreon video week, so. Then I made a three-piece video filigree stuff on Thursday, which seems to be doing pretty well. People seem to like that. That one took me till about 11 at night to finish that one out. Just the jewelry, not the editing and everything. Inevitably, someone's going to ask me what torch I use. It's a Silversmith model torch. It's their acetylene air torch. I use a #1 tip on it most of the time. I actually think I don't think I even have a 0. I think I just have a 1, 2, and a 3 in the tip size. Well, I have a couple of old antique prasiolite, or excuse me, prestolite torches that have #1s on them, or 0s or something like that, so they're a little bit smaller tipped. I can always use those if I have to. Although I honestly don't ever seem to have a need to use anything but the 1 for the most part. Unless I'm melting some quantity of silver. Make sure it stayed round. It's pretty close. Close enough. Let's make sure it's nice and flat. I want to get these prongs in the right spot and symmetrical. I usually draw a little square that's the same size as the circle. If I line this up like this, I can see, if I get that pretty centered, I can make a little mark where each of the prongs should be mounted. The one there. That should get us pretty close. Alright, like I said, I think I was going to use 16, but I'm going to use 18 for all of these. So I want it to be maybe twice as big as the diameter of this, ish. And then I'll cut a second one. Let's find the center of these. Close, anyway. If I'm doing thicker ones, I usually file a little bit of a notch on one. But I think since these have a little bit of a curve to them, it should be able to solder them pretty easily. Yeah. And then I'll just solder that there. If you've never seen pick soldering before, I have a video about it right there. It's a super good technique for placing solder precisely where you want it. So I have all this solder over here. You can just pick up a little piece like this. Trick to pick soldering, after you watch a video you'll know this, but is really not sticking it in there until things are just about to that flow temperature. And really I just want these to be vertical, coming straight down on the edge where each of these little marks are. So I need to spend a little time bending these down. It's not too shabby for the first go. Pretty close. This will probably throw it way off now. Story of my life. Get it almost there and then screw it up by changing it slightly. That looks reasonably good. Is it perfect? No. Is it good enough for Chad? Probably. That'll work. Alright. I'm going to try and dry this kind of slowly so it doesn't move around on me. This is one of those situations where pick soldering will come in handy. You got to get both of these up to temperature, and then I need to get solder to attach to both. Now, that just attached to the wire that time as far as I could tell, so I need to heat the bottom a little bit more. to get those actually attached. There we go, I saw some flow there. Okay, what I was looking for was not just jumping onto the wire, which is easy to get up to the temperature, but this piece that's down below it, which is kind of not as exposed to the flame as this stuff up here. Get both of them up to 1450 degrees so that it sticks to both. So now, I usually just leave this, at this stage. There's no sense cutting it off yet. I'm still going to have to solder it onto this other piece here and then solder that one onto this piece. So I really don't want to have those just sitting up unsupported when I go to do those things. And so I might as well just leave it like that. I can always, after it's all assembled, then snip them off. That makes sense. I'm also, once I'm done here, I'm probably going to take the file and file a taper at maybe a 45-degree angle or so on the inside of that ring so that the stone sits in there nicely. Like I said, I think I'm gonna, now that I showed you how to do that, I'm gonna do the same thing for these smaller ones, and but I'm not gonna make you watch me do the same thing over and over again. So I'll be right back, and then we'll shape these things too and create a bail for it. So I got my 3 little stone settings, and now I need to make these little wavy parts that go in between. Like I said, I think I'm going to use 14 gauge for this one and 12 gauge for this one. I have a little piece of 14 gauge here. I think it's 14. It probably is 14, and that's what I'm going to use for this one to start with. And I think, straighten a bit of this out. This is pretty close to the size of this thing here, so I'm going to use this part of my these bail making pliers to get that first part there going. And square wire always tries to twist on you, so you got to kind of fiddle with it to keep it doing what you want it to do. I'm going to move these out of the way for the moment. So about like that. Then we got to go back the other way too. That's not too bad. It's easiest to bend when you leave it attached to a little bit of something to hold on to. That'll give you a little bit of leverage too. If I cut it off just to the right length and then try to bend it, it's a little bit harder to deal with, I think. That's pretty close. Let's see how that looks in real life. That's pretty good, so length is fine if I cut it off about right there. And then I can fine tune that little curve so it fits on there nicely. Cut it off right about here. With stuff like this, to protect my fingers a little bit, sometimes since I need to taper this down, I want this to kind of go tapering gradually down on either side. Just put that on there like that. Holding it with the pliers, just kind of file that around at the top. I'm losing my grip in more ways than one. We're pretty close there, I think. Let's go ahead and make the bigger one. We need a piece of 12 gauge instead. Is this 12? 14. Here's 12. Here's a bit of 12. It's a basic idea. Okay, I'm going to do a little more refining of the curves here and making sure everything touches all along the whole length. Do that next. Be right back. So my side camera wasn't recording when I soldered this stuff in, and so I'm going to explain what I did because I can't go back and do it again. I sweated a little bit of solder on the inside curve of each of these curved pieces, so a little bit right there, a little bit right there, a little bit right there. I soldered this one on first by just heating the whole thing till that solder remelted and adhered to the one that was right next to it. I lined this one up nicely, and then I reheated both of them until this one flowed right here. And then I added this one on, same way, and then I added this one on. I had to actually adjust the angle slightly because it wasn't quite lined up the way I wanted it to. And now the last thing I'm going to do is add a jump ring here. So I'm sorry about that. That occasionally happens where my camera on the side stops working or runs out of juice. This time I think I may have just forgotten to turn it on, so that's my fault. But I'll show you adding a jump ring, and then I'll make a bail for it after that. So. This is one of those situations where this is much smaller than the other piece, so I'm going to spend a lot of the time on the bigger piece before I even put some heat on here. Let's see how straight I have that window. That's pretty good. Okay. All right. Now I have to figure out what kind of a bail I'm going to make. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some 6 gauge half round, and this piece is about 20 millimeters ish, and I'm going to file this into a diamond shape sideways. It's easiest to do while you're still attached to the roll for me. Make sure I have it straight across from there. Okay. So basically I'm just delineating where I'm going to end it on this side. This side I'm just going to file to kind of a taper. We just need to bend this back on itself. I think I may use the Dremel to thin it out a bit in the middle here on the underside so that it's easier to bend there. So I'll be right back. this pretty much drawn together. Once I put this over the top of this, if I can get it over there we go. Then I need to get this to kind of touch in the middle by bending them in just a little bit that way. And then I should be able to just kind of fix solder that closed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pickle that, and then I'll come back and finish it up for you. Okay, so got things mostly cleaned up. I went ahead and set the top two here. I'm going to put this last one in front of you, and then I'll do some generalized cleanup on the prong tips, just using some abrasive wheels and maybe a little bit of filing. This one needs a little more work here. Let's go ahead and pop this one in. Oops. Just moving these in one at a time until the stone stops moving around on me, which isn't happening quickly enough. So once the tips of these start getting in the way, I'm going to snip off just a little bit more so that they're not going to bump into each other. This is not the final length I'm going to cut them to. Now I'm just going to kind of push them down as far as they'll go. Then I'm going to cut them off just a little bit up the girdle facet there. Right there. Okay, so then I'm going to, like I said, I'll use the file and the Dremel to kind of clean those tips up, get everything polished up. I may hit the wheel one more time to get in between these a little better, and then I'll take some pictures of it. So, alright, well that was the graduated 3-stone swirl pendant, I guess we'll call it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, make sure to hit the like button. I'd love to have you leave a comment as well. And take a moment and check out my playlist page. There's all sorts of ways to view my channel. If you're a beginner and you want beginner projects, there's a beginner playlist. If you want to learn, focus on learning how to do prong settings, there's a prong setting list. So things are divided up into useful categories now that there's over 270 videos on the channel. So check that out. Give me a subscribe. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And You know, before you leave, check out the video description for the various important links. There's a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page. There's a link to my merch store where you can get one of those nice design idea notebooks or some other merch. There's a link to my website where you should check out some jewelry for sale. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon page where you can find out a little bit more about that over there. Thanks again for taking the time to watch. I appreciate it. Take care. Happy silversmithing.